Hi, my name is Shanda Rule. I'm a singer, storyteller, joy spreader, and host of the Courageous Voice podcast. The Courageous Voice podcast gathers and shares stories from artistic folks around the world and their journeys through fear, courageousness, and creativity. Join us and get inspired with me as we chat about learning to befriend and walk with and past our fears to share our voices courageously with the world. Welcome back to our listeners. Welcome to the Courageous Voice. We are delighted that you are joining us today, and I am super honored to welcome Reverend Lindsey Turner, also known as the Bad Pastor, to the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Of course, I would do anything for you, Shanda. It's so good to be here. It's so good to see your face and hear your beautiful voice.
Thank you. Thank you likewise. So for all you listeners out there, Reverend Lindsey is a pastor, as I said, a seeker of the divine, an explorer of queer faith, an astrologist. I have so many things down here. Blogger, a trauma coach, a singer, a furniture restorer, which I saw on Instagram.
You've been paying attention.
I have been paying attention because that looks so cool. Dog lover and parent. So, listen, did I leave something out? Tell me more.
I'm a full-time construction worker and astrologer on the side, maybe. I do want to mention to you, and you may have missed this, but I came out as non-binary a couple of years ago, so I'm using they, them pronouns now.
Yes! You also recently purchased an orchard, which is why you're saying that you were doing renovations.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I should say that I purchased an orchard with a community of people. So yeah, not a solo enterprise whatsoever. We're doing some radical things. I'm sharing this property with my former husband, who's my best friend in the whole world, and our friend Joe. And she basically leveraged her ability to secure a mortgage, which AJ and I couldn't do because AJ's finishing his PhD program. And I had to hit the restart button on my career a few years ago. Really exciting, I think, what we're doing together, and definitely feels connected to my faith and this kind of communal sharing.
There's so many questions, but listen, I want to start with the one that I know most people are still wondering about and haven't gotten past, and that is Bad Pastor. Tell us, what is Bad Pastor? Because I think that also connects into some of your career transitions, you coming out as non-binary. Tell us about Bad Pastor and how that came to be.
Yeah. When I left the church in 2018, or I should say like the institutional church, right? The big C church. A series of events occurred where basically I think everyone came to the conclusion, although rather traumatically, that my understanding of what it meant to be a Christian wasn't necessarily compatible with institutional church's understanding of what it meant to be a Christian. And that's about all I can really say on that. But in order to hold on to my integrity, I left. And I think that's a really common story, actually. I counsel a lot of people for whom that's the truth. I moved pretty far away across the country after deciding that that was no longer for me, and was waiting tables and working at a bookstore and just trying to figure out what was next. And I earned this nickname. I think one of the bartenders at one of the restaurants I worked at just started calling me the Bad Pastor.
Okay.
Because I think they saw me pushing a lot of boundaries just in terms of gender and the way that I relate to people in my life and the politics that I hold, the way that I think I live out my faith upends the way that people perceive most Christians to be.
Yet still shepherding, obviously, if they're still calling you a pastor. So that's so interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I did my best to like not broadcast that I was a pastor or a minister, and people still figured it out.
Wow.
I think being in those spaces and just being like a pastoral presence, I think mattered. And then I think there's just this, it's just silly, like, you're bad. Like, I'm cute. I'm a bad pastor. that sort of thing. Yeah, I think that's how Bad Pastor came about. And lately I've been saying I'm a bad pastor, but I'm a good heretic, living into the heretical life.
And one of those things also that you've been doing in that direction, astrology.
Yeah.
Which I think is amazing. And there's a couple of things working with gender and astrology. And there's also the maker of the Bear Astrology School for Good Heretics.
Yeah, yeah. So of course, when I left the church, there was a kind of a giant hole because, as some folks who are listening may know, church ministry is an all-consuming business. For church ministers, you're on full-time plus your community is your workspace. So when you lose one, you lose the other. And I had always had this passing interest in astrology. I would, when I was a kid, lay in bed and look out the window and just look at the stars as late as I could until I fell asleep, and was always curious about it. And then after the church, really was searching for community and was able to find this really beautiful, grounded, queer community in the astrology world, and began getting really into that. And I think a lot of people come to different frameworks of meaning making through really difficult times, because terrible things happen and then we're like, why did this happen? What do I make of this? What do I do now? And that was how I came into really both Christianity and astrology each time, trying to get grounded and reoriented after life upheaval, which happens to the best of us. That's how I came to astrology, and then just started really studying it in earnest and practicing it, and practicing reading natal charts for my friends, and then doing it professionally, and started making connections between astrology and Christianity, and started getting really curious. Because I think in our minds, astrology and Christianity are these two separate frameworks. When in reality, they were very much going on at the same time and being developed, sort of codified in the same region of the world, in the Mediterranean basin, if we're talking about Western astrology, in the Mediterranean basin several thousand years ago. 2,000 years ago. And the institutional church, as it wants to do historically, really did its best to name astrology as a heresy. One of the biggest arguments against astrology is that it was like the language of the angels, or a practice of angels given to women.
Okay.
And so therefore it was heresy because it was a women's practice. I would have to go back and look at which early church philosopher said this, but it was one of the big ones. And so that's BS.
Yeah. I've never heard that, but that's an interesting little fact coming up around like very conservative views on Christianity. Everything other than was, oh, that's the devil's work. So it's interesting to hear these other explanations, especially when it's so clearly wrapped up into so much biblical text, which is something that I read in your awesome blog. Also, you're talking about some stuff with, was it Job?
Maker of the bear is part of a verse in Job. Yeah, whereas I refer to God as maker of the bear and Orion and the Pleiades, right? Like God is the maker of the constellations. The Bible is filled with astrological references or astronomical references, because at the time that these texts were written, astronomy and astrology were actually one and the same. So it was a science and a meaning-making framework. And only since then have the two become like bifurcated. But yeah, astrology, the church threw out astrology with women's leadership.
Okay.
So we can see that they're very much tied together. And so, yes, this course, Maker of the Bear, I'm actually teaching with my friend, Sarah Knoll, who I connected with on the internet. Nice. She saw what I was doing. And Sarah is a clinical pastoral educator. And so basically, Sarah's job is to teach chaplains how to be chaplains. So she's just an incredible mind, incredibly kind, and really skillful faith practitioner, and is super into astrology. And so together we've been collaborating in partnership, developing offerings that knit together astrology and Christianity, which is actually quite easy to do because at one point they were knit together.
Wow. Okay. Well, this is awesome. So people can actually come to your school to learn this.
Yeah, we're starting our first series at the end of July 20th.
Nice.
And Sarah and I are teaching, we're going to teach on the liturgical seasons and how they map on to the zodiac and vice versa.
I know so many people that would be into that.
Oh, spread the news, please.
I will.
And
Okay.
we're going to look at your moon sign
Okay.
and talk about pastoral care or community care and your moon sign. My friend Dan, who is this amazing, he's an Aussie and he has his PhD in philosophy and poetry, which is so beautiful. He's teaching on the history of the church and astrology. I'm not a great historian, right? Like I learned something and I'm like, oh yeah, this confirms that my idea was right. But I don't really pay attention to the details so much. But Dan is super facile with details and history. And so he's teaching on the history of the church and astrology and where the ruptures happen. And then we have a really exciting guest, Nate Craddock, who is a UCC pastor and professional astrologer. And he might be the only person that I know of at the moment who is in a church setting and practicing astrology and doing both openly. And he's brilliant. And he's going to, I think, do a sort of mystical offering on the nexus of astrology and Christianity. I think it's going to be a banger. I'm really excited.
That sounds amazing. And I know right when you were first starting to offer readings and things, I texted you on Instagram. I'm like, oh, I would love to do this because I don't know much about astrology at all, but I'm so curious. And what made me more curious is I think, was it last year? So many things I got into during the lockdown, but last year I got into human design. I got obsessed with human design. But one of the things that I read was that astrology was part of human design. And so then, of course, I'm like, okay, I just want to know about everything that's a part of this amazing tool. So yeah, I'm definitely going to check out some of these classes and I still want my reading.
Oh, I would love to do that. What's your sun sign?
Okay. I get all these things mixed up, but I know Aquarius because I'm January 21st,
But
right?
I thought I remembered. Yeah, your sun would be in Aquarius. That's based on your birth date.
Aquarius.
Yeah.
So I know that there was Aquarius, there's Taurus in there, and there's Virgo. But I don't know what rising is.
I wonder if you have a Taurus moon because that is like one of the most beautiful, blessed placements there is.
Is it? Really? I claim it. Yeah. I claim it.
Well, and we get back into the Bible, right? This language of exalted, right? Like we see that in the Bible all the time. Exaltation. It's also in astrology, and the moon is exalted in Taurus. It's held in kind of the highest regard.
That will make sense. My name means moon. Too many connections. These little connections are pretty wild. Pretty wild.
Yeah. I wrote a blog on Aquarius and improvisation. You should check that out. I think you'd be super interested in that. But Aquarius is basically the sign that learns all the rules and then learns how to break them, which I associate with improvisation a whole lot.
Wow. Thank you for saying that. And if you're listening, please check out Lindsey's blog. The blog is on badpastor.me. So check out the blog. The writing is fantastic. And I will definitely be reading about the Aquarian love and improvisation because I love improvisation. Talk to me about how tarot plays into all of this, or is that something separate, something that you've always loved doing?
There's like a deep mirroring, right? Where you pull cards and it shows you maybe things that you weren't conscious of or like hidden truths. There's a kind of uncovering aspect to it, I think. And I think it's a really grounding practice, especially when you're feeling uncertain or unsure about a decision or what's going on in your life and how to work with that. And I do have some clients that I work with tarot. Actually, I have one and he draws the cards. And then we read them together and I like reflect back like, well, this is what I know about this card and this is what I see is happening in your life. And so we do use it as a tool for kind of spiritual and emotional discernment. And yeah, I think there are many different ways to approach tarot, but for me, it's a really grounding practice. And it's not one that I use primarily in my practice. I'm a lot more astrology focused. There are people who are way more talented and skillful with the tarot than I am, but I do think it's a wonderful archetypal tool to use.
This is beautiful. I just started getting into that again during lockdown. I feel like I got into everything during lockdown. And I got a reading from, do you know Zanetta? She goes by Art Witch. And she's like, do you have a deck? And I'm like, no, I don't have anything. And come to find out, I did. And then I bought another one, but I've been getting more into it in a similar way of just drawing and seeing, really using a lot of intuition in this, because one of the decks that I have, she specifically was talking about using your intuition and encouraging everyone using this deck to first use their intuition before even knowing what these cards mean. And it's been enlightening and grounding, like you said.
Yeah. I think like astrology, tarot is this kind of complete archetypal language, and the infinite iterations of life experience can be found in the cards, just like they can be found in the astrological archetypes. And that's how I think of both of them, really, as complete symbolic languages.
Yeah. And this is reminding me, did you adopt a child?
AJ and I have spiritually adopted a trans son, basically. This is an expression of queer family, because families of origin don't always do the best job loving their children. So yeah, this is a younger person that we've taken as our own queer kin.
This is my way of keeping in touch with y'all. I'm online scrolling and seeing what's going on in people's lives. It's like, my son, this.
I love hearing the story that you knit together based on those loose pieces of information. Spiritual adoption, I guess you would call it. They're an adult.
Okay. And I saw that too. I was like, okay, that's great. I think that's beautiful.
A young adult. They just turned 22.
Okay.
So, yeah, but they call us mom and dad. It's super sweet.
Nice. Yeah. Okay, I have one more question about your music. Are you still musicking?
I'm trying. I asked AJ and our community partner, orchard partner, Joanna, if they would get me a piano for Christmas.
Wow.
There are all kinds of free pianos. Most places, people are giving away pianos because it's very expensive to get rid of. It's actually cheaper to just give them away to people who are willing to haul them off. And they sneakily secured a piano for me over Christmas. And yeah, I woke up Christmas morning to a piano in the living room and just cried, because I think I had always imagined that I would really be home when there was a piano in my home. And that's been a dream that I've had since I was really little. And I've taken piano lessons here and there, but I'm by no means a fluent pianist.
Okay.
But then we had this magical man come and tune the piano one day. I was just like, you are so sweet. He's a retired high school band teacher. And he's like, well, I give lessons too. And I was like, sign me up. So I've been taking some lessons. And I don't know if you saw on my Instagram story a few days ago, but I posted me playing and singing just for some comfort with all of the political chaos that's happening. And I'm singing and playing and trying to keep my hand in. It's hard during the pandemic. It's been hard to gather. And of course, music is, for me, something that happens in community. And I'm looking forward to finding some more opportunities, maybe to sing in a choir again. Yeah, I really miss that part of myself. Part of my life.
Listen, I'm just wondering, because you did mention the singing was comforting, and you mentioned before that you had been doing some self-care. I'm just wondering what else you're doing for yourself, because like you mentioned, there's so much to hold and sift through at the moment. So you're singing, you're playing your piano a bit, you are getting some body work. What else?
That has been crucial. I had been in therapy pretty continuously for about 10 years, and got to a point last fall where I said to my therapist, I said, I think I need to switch to a different modality. I think there's some other stuff. And I was introduced to a massage therapist in town who works on a sliding scale and works out of her home. And she's just so sweet. I was just over there, and her gardens erupting, and she has all these chickens, and it's just really, she's magical. And so I've been getting massage a few times a month, which has been really critical in keeping me grounded. And yeah, I think sitting down, and even if I'm playing poorly, playing the piano and singing, I try to tell folks who struggle with doing things for themselves as I do, like just for themselves, to find that something that they can do and that never feel guilty about it. And maybe that's a place that hopefully people can arrive to if they're not already there, but finding that something where, you know, if I'm feeling sad, if I'm feeling sick, if I'm feeling joyful, like I can just always sit down and play some chords and sing. And it doesn't matter if anyone's around to share it with or not. It's a gift to me. And I think also an expression of worship, you know, that worthship that we learned, right? The root of that word, to show what you place value in.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think trying to eat from the ground. I have done some volunteering at this farm across the street, and that's been so helpful to literally put your hands in the dirt and to be of service to people. I think is really grounding, because it's almost this like embodied reminder that people are good and helpful when we're being good and helpful.
Yeah.
And just building those connections. And I think we're in a socio-political environment that demands us to reconnect to our immediate neighbors and really say, okay, we're so much stronger together, right?
Yeah.
I can come help you grow your food, and you give me a bag of food. And with that bag of food, I have someone over to dinner. To just get that movement of reciprocity and mutuality going in your location. I think that's really a sweet way to stay grounded.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Listen, Lindsey, tell us one more time where we can sign up for your new course.
Yeah. So my website is badpastor.me. Someone out there has badpastor.com. If you're listening, I'd love to buy it from you. Badpastor.me. And it's called Maker of the Bear. It starts July 20th. We're really hoping to facilitate a community and a network of people who are doing this work together. We have a lot of spiritual directors and ministers and lay people and people who are like, I grew up in the church, but I don't know anymore. It's a whole collection of people who are doing all sorts of different and amazing things, but fostering community is one of my biggest passions. And so I'm just really excited to get everyone in the room, and not only to teach, but to learn, because I think teaching is learning.
Yeah. That sounds amazing. I'm glad about this. So this is
the 20th. And all but one of the classes is on Wednesday evening if you're in the state. And if you're not, we're going to record all the classes so that you can watch them on playback if you can't make it live.
Oh, that's great.
Make it as accessible as possible to folks.
Okay. That's great. That's great. Yeah. And where else can we find you, though? It's Instagram also. Instagram, Twitter.
Yeah, I'd say Instagram is probably where I'm most active. Bad.pastor on Instagram. And just head to my website, and I'm blogging on there. You can just fill out my little contact form and I'll add you to my email list. And I do spiritual care, spiritual direction and accompaniment, astrology consultations, and yeah, group work. So a lot of this stuff I'm doing behind the scenes, one-on-one with people. So if you're interested in working one-on-one with me, please reach out on my contact page on my website.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I am so glad that we got to connect, and thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for being you. I love you, my friend, and it's just so good to see you.
I love you too. The Courageous Voice podcast is a collaboration between Connect.Faith and me, Shanda Rule. Music is by Ike Sturm and production by Jess Burchett. Thanks for listening.